Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. We are Socket Mobile, and we provide mobile data capture solutions for business applications. Today, our speaker, Matthew, will be walking through how to develop a Flutter app with integrated data capture functionality. And the webinar is being fully recorded today, and we will be uploading it to our website and also sending you a link if you wish to go back and review any of the information presented. If you do have any questions throughout the session, you can go ahead and type them into the question portion of the panel on your screen, and members of our software development team will be answering them in the background. Also, there will be a very short survey that will be popping up at the end of the session. So please go ahead and take a few moments to fill this out, as we value any input that you might have about your webinar experience today. And with that, I will go ahead and hand it on over to Matt to get us started.
Alrighty, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm Matt, and we'll be going over how to develop a Flutter app with integrated data capture functionality. With that, let's get started. Okay, so first we'll talk a little bit about what Flutter is. Flutter is an open source framework by Google. It's used for building beautiful, natively compiled, multi-platform applications from a single code base. It offers multi-platform support, including iOS, Android, and the web. It's a framework that leverages Dart, which is a programming language that Google developed so that it could be fast and syntactically familiar for developers. The UI implements widgets for state management and rendering. You can think of it like you would think of React and React Native's component-based UI. So the Flutter Capture SDK is just the Capture SDK by Socket Mobile with added support for Flutter development. It currently supports Android and iOS platforms. Web support is less of a priority at the moment, as we have the CaptureJS Web SDK, as well as other web-based solutions. It offers multi-platform support, including iOS, Android, and the web. Oh, sorry, that's from the other one. So yeah, to use the Capture SDK in your Flutter app, you simply go to pub.dev and download the pub package Capture SDK. And then you import it into your Dart files like you would any other pub package to be used in and along with your widgets. So during the demo, we'll walk through the Flutter app, basically go over how to import the package and initialize or open a Capture instance. This way you can communicate with the Capture service. We'll also introduce you to Capture events, as well as different types of events, such as device arrival, device removal, and decoded data. And then we'll go through an introduction to Capture properties. We'll also introduce you to the methods getProperty and setProperty. So with that, let's jump right in. And before we actually start any development, what I will do is I'll show you basically how to register your application, because you have to do this initially to get the proper credentials so you can communicate with the service. This way Socket can whitelist your application. Okay, so essentially you want to go to getting started with Flutter Capture SDK. And it basically will go over the requirements that you need. There are requirements for iOS and Android, respectively. So when we go down here, the first thing you're going to want to do is create an app key. This is essentially going to be, these are going to be your credentials in order to validate your access to the Capture service. So we can just go here. Okay, so to do this, essentially, actually, let's go back to here. Oh, sorry, sorry, I thought there was a page before that. So yeah, so when you come here, basically you're gonna pick Flutter. We offer a number of languages for Capture support, but for this case, we'll use Flutter. And then you'll select the platform that you want to use. If you want to use both iOS and Android, you essentially just have to go through this process a second time, selecting the other platform. So for this case, we're only going to be demonstrating iOS, but yeah, if you wanted to have both, after you register this, you'll go back and just select Android and fill everything out again. And yeah, so you'll put in an application name. I already have this one set up. And then the iOS bundle ID, you'll basically use the same bundle ID that is in your runner, and that can be found if you open your project in Xcode. And I'll show you that in a moment after we get through this. Your application market is essentially where you think the app that you're developing is best catered to. For the time being, you can just put other. Now, if you want your application to show up on the Socket mobile site, you can select yes. Otherwise, you don't have to. Functional description is basically just a brief description of what your app tries to accomplish. That's what I have here. And now your bundle ID status, you can select production, unless you have other environments such as staging, but for now, production is sufficient. Now, if you have an MFI protocol string other than com.socketmobile CHS, you would put that here. For this demonstration, we don't. We'll just be using this, so we can skip that part. Application version, you can just do the first version since it's a new application, and then just your personal information. Once you submit that, you should be generated app info that looks like this. This is essentially what's going to be passed to your Open Capture function. So basically you'll be able to, this is what you pass along so that you can initiate the connection to the Capture service, and the service can validate that you can use it. Alrighty, so now let's go to essentially our code. Yeah, so now this is our application, but before going any further, basically what you're going to want to do, this application initially was created with just Flutter create, and I removed a lot of the boilerplate code and replaced it with code pertinent to this project. So the first thing you're going to want to do for iOS is essentially you're going to want to go to your pod file, and then up here, this is likely going to be commented out, platform iOS 9. What you're going to want to do is uncomment it out and have it like I have it here for iOS 10.1. And then once you're finished with that, you can head over to your runner on your info plist file. And essentially, you're going to want to put this all the way at the bottom, right before the closing dict tag. And this essentially allows your Bluetooth to connect to a provided Socket mobile device. And then the last thing that you're going to want to do is let's open up Xcode and select your runner. And this was the bundle identifier I was talking about before. During your app registration, the bundle ID just needs to match this one. But the next thing that we need to do is go to build settings. And then after build settings, we can search for module. And then go down to Apple Clang language modules. and you're going to want to switch this to yes. I already have it switched on for yes. But if you don't have yours selected that way, that's what you're going to want to do. Okay, so with that, I think we have everything set up the iPad, and we can actually try to run this application. So let's see how that goes. Yeah, and so while we're waiting for this to get up and running, you would install the package how you would any other Flutter package, just Flutter pub get CaptureSDK, and then you would import it in the top of your file up here. Now I've also added a few state values that are going to be useful to us throughout the demonstration. The status is basically just what we're going to use to let the UI know if any errors have occurred, what step in the connection process we're up to, device discovery, etc. And then message is essentially going to be the more defined message to go along with whatever codes or whatever successful requests that we make. Up here, capture is going to be an instance of our capture class. The capture class is essentially where a lot of the logic is initiated from. This is where the connection to our basically to the capture library takes place. It's where your app info is validated and so on. And then we have device capture, which is essentially going to be another capture instance, but this time it's going to be a capture instance that is tied to a device that you have. So this will operate as the root capture, establishing the connection to the capture SDK library. And then this will be the capture instance that's tied to your device. Current scan essentially is going to be an instance of capture event. This will come in, and this is where we're going to be able to store our decoded data when we're able to scan, a barcode or QR code, and it'll show up here. And then devices. This is just going to be a list of device info objects. So for every device that you have connected to your application, essentially it's going to be an instance of device info, and you'll be able to get a more granular view of the devices themselves. Okay, so now our application is loaded. You can see, welcome to the Socket Mobile webinar. This is just the default message because we haven't actually attempted to open capture just yet. As you'll see in the init state function, I've commented that out. But basically, once I uncomment this out, it's going to run this function. And this function essentially takes our app info that you were able to get from registering your application. We're going to instantiate a capture object, and then we're going to assign that to our root capture. This will be used later on. Well, it'll be used now to open the capture, but then this will also be valuable later on when we're trying to connect an actual device. And here we have our try catch statement that will attempt to open the capture client. Open client accepts app info. These are the credentials that are going to validate whether or not you can access the service. And then on capture event is a callback that's provided. And this is essentially where we're going to be handling all of our different events, whether it's device arrival, when a device first connects, or if it's device removal, when you disconnect the device, and so on. And then here in capturing exception, we basically wrap all of the errors, and our error handling is wrapped in a capture exception instance, basically to just unify error handling. Okay, so now let's actually see what it looks like when we, and then I'll get to update vals a little bit later. Oh, sorry, one more thing. So this logger basically is just an instance of the logger class. A developer can write their own that basically logs various events that are happening in your application, stack tracing, stuff like that. You don't have to provide this to the capture instance when you're instantiating it, but if you want to, you can pass your own, otherwise it'll just default to the standard one that we provide. Okay, so let's uncomment this out and reload our application. Restart, and cool. So here you can see we've connected to the capture, capture service, and then it also detected the device manager being open. So cool. This is a sign that your credentials worked, and you can now take the next step and actually try to connect a device. So what you want to do with that is you should basically take a Socket Mobile device. I have with me a D740 scanner, and essentially you'll just want to pair it to your external device. In my case, it's a tablet, or it's an iPad. And then yeah, once you pair it, you can turn it on. I'm not sure if you heard the beep, but I just turned it on, and hopefully it'll remember it. Okay, you can see it's connecting it. Cool. All right, so we've opened the device, and I'll just go through basically how that's handled in the on capture event. So we'll get to this in a second. So on capture event is essentially our big switch statement that picks up on various capture events and handles them accordingly. So obviously if event is not valid, then we don't do anything. If there's a capture exception, we update the state values, status, and message to reflect that. And then this is essentially the logger that I've created here. Again, this is optional. But basically, by using this, we can see here on capture event this is the device handle or the event handle. And as we can see, there was a device arrival for my scanner, and then this is the GUI ID. So we can actually go down to the first case, which is device arrival. So essentially your event is going to have an ID attached to it. And depending on what that ID is, it can correspond to device arrival, device removal, decoded data, stuff like that. So in this case, it corresponded to device arrival. So once we pick up on this, we essentially create a new capture instance, which is the device capture. And we will store this in our local state. And once we have that device capture, we can go to our open device helper. So the open device helper is just broken out logic that basically allows you to make the open device request. So just because it connects to your device doesn't necessarily mean that the device is opened. That's just the initial arrival of the device. Once the arrival is successful, you'll want to actually open it, because this way, if you open it, you can access the trigger, you can see the device information and all that stuff. And so here we have our list of devices. Obviously right now it's empty, or it was empty. But yeah, so what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to add our device to this array, or to this list, sorry, so long as we can successfully open it. If we can't open it successfully, we don't add it, because right now, if your device is not usable, then it shouldn't really be considered a valid device. So yeah, we have another try-catch statement. Essentially, we try to execute the open device function that is accessible on our device capture. And what we're going to do for that is we're going to pass our device GUID as well as our root capture instance. This will allow us to open the device within the scope of our root capture connection. So if our response is 0, that implies that it was a successful opening, and then we simply add it to our device list. Yeah, and then that updating is done in update values. Obviously, if there's exception, we handle that as well. Okay, so that was opening the device. Now let's see if we can actually decode some data now that we have this device accessible. So for that, I'm going to go down to our UI. I commented out a lot of the code initially. So I think for now we'll be able to do this. So here we'll have our list of devices. Okay, we have our list view builder. I think that's all we need now. Oh, and then we can also do scanned data. Actually, this one, let's not do that. Okay, cool. So essentially what we can focus on now is the device list. It's going to be rendered as a list of printed devices. Essentially, it's just going to be their index +1 so that it can be a numeric list. And then we're going to render their names followed by their GUID. And then below that, we actually have our scanned data section. So in order to show the scanned data, essentially this will be, or current scan, sorry, will be set in a decoded device or decoded data capture event. So, and I'll get to that in a second, but for now, I'll just demonstrate how this would look if we scan some data. So here we have the scanner showing up as well as the device manager, or as well as the Bluetooth device manager. For scanned data, we currently don't have any data because we haven't scanned anything yet, but I will pull up a QR code to scan. All right, so let's see. That one didn't work. Let me try this one. Okay, so there. So we were able to pick up data, and this is just rendering the decoded data as a string for presentation purposes. So basically, I scanned a QR code using my connected scanner, and this is a portion of the data that was collected from that. So now let's actually go to that event, which is here, capture event IDs decoded data. So essentially, I'm just storing the entire event in current scan, and then I'm updating the status and the message here. Okay, so that's how we would handle scanned data. You don't have to store it as a string. I was just doing that for our purposes. So, oh, another thing, this event device manager arrival, that's what you see here on the tablet where it says Bluetooth device manager. Yeah, it's a separate type of device, essentially. It's not like your hard device that you have connected here. Yeah, And then now, if we want, I can actually just disconnect the device and it should be visible in the application. Yes. So here the device manager is still open, but the status, the device is closed, successfully removed my scanner. Cool. So that's an example of a device removal event. So we can actually go to our close device helper. It's similar to our open device helper, except instead of opening the device, it simply just closes it. So here we check if device capture is valid. If it is, close it. And then if we get 0 as the response, that implies that it was a successful device removal. And then we reset our state values. Current scan is null, device capture is null. And then we remove it, sorry, I missed this. We remove it from our list of devices. And then we reset the devices array. So as you can see here, under devices, we no longer have my scanner. We simply just have the Bluetooth device manager. All right, so we've closed that. So now that we went through those events, I'll introduce you to properties. So essentially, each capture instance and each capture or each device instance as well, they have various properties. These properties can include friendly name. So as you see, successfully removed my scanner. That's an example of the friendly name that you can change to tailor, whatever you want your device's friendly or readable name to be. This is a differentiator from the device's handle or the device's GUI ID. So here we will actually, let's see, device capture. So let's comment this part out. And then handle get name property. We actually haven't done that yet, but I have some code over here that I can pull over and I'll explain it. Okay. So this is an example using get property, except we're going to be getting a specific property called friendly device name. So here we create an instance of capture property, and we do this by providing a capture property ID as well as a capture property type and provided value. Since this is a get, we're just going to provide the capture property ID. We provide capture property type of none, and then we pass an empty map as the value. And here we have a try catch that essentially is going to try to call get property on our device capture instance, and it accepts the argument of the capture property that we've provided or that we've instantiated. If it's successful, we'll see this message. Otherwise, we handle our errors accordingly. So let's actually see what this looks like. Okay, so here we have our device. Oh, it's only picking up this one. Should have picked up the other one. Maybe that one came second. Oh, my mistake. I disconnected the device. So actually, let me reconnect it. And there we go, my scanner. And so now I'll just click that little plus button and it'll show you an example of a get property request being made. And hopefully it will be successful. All right, there we go. So this essentially means that we were able to, or that we provided the right argument and we were able to get a specific property from our device. There are a few other options that you can use and a couple of other properties that you can access, such as trigger and other sound characteristics. But for now, we'll just stop with the friendly device name. All right, so now that we were able to get the property, let's try and set this property and actually change it to something else. So we'll go down here. Uncomment this kind of code out. So essentially what we're doing is we're going to have some state values provided that are essentially going to, and we're also going to include our input box. So essentially it's going to be a text input that allows you to update or basically enter a new name that you want to provide to your device. Once you do that, you'll be able to hit the set request and then hopefully it will be successful. So in order to do that though, we'll need to add a few things. So the first one we'll add is handle set name property. You can do that right underneath the get request. And here you can see that we have new name and name controller that we still have to define. So let's go back up to the top with the rest of our state values. Essentially, we're just going to define a string, which is going to be new name. Cool, so we've defined that. And then we still have to do the name controller. So in order to do that, we will basically instantiate a text editing controller. This is a class provided by Flutter that basically allows you to create an editable text box. Okay, so we have name controller. Excuse me, oh, sorry. Forgot one thing. And this is essentially how, with our instantiated text editing controller, we can add an event listener. And that event listener is going to be handle name change. And actually that we can just put under here. Handle name change. Cool. And then we'll set state. New name will be equal to the name controller's text value. Okay, so just to recap, we instantiated the text editing controller class, and I'll go back down to the widgets to show you where that's applied, but essentially this is going to allow us to add sorry, this is going to allow us to add an event listener to the provided input text box. And that event listener is going to be handle name change, and essentially that's just going to update the state of new name, which we should be able to see in the UI as well. All right, so let's go back down. And actually, before we go any further with that, I'll also show you our set name property. So it's very similar to get name property, except this time for property type, you're going to want to pass the actual property type that corresponds to the property you're trying to update. In this case, the property type is a string, so it has an ID of 5. And then for the value, you're also going to want to pass the updated string value for new name. Once you've instantiated a capture property, you can pass it as an argument to set property, which is another method on top of the device capture that we can use to change, in this case, the friendly name of our device. If it's successful, we'll get a successful notification. Otherwise, the error will be handled accordingly. So let's actually restart our app. And let's see how that looks. Okay, so that was actually a good example of the different steps that happen basically when you restart the capture instance. So basically, we reconnected to the capture service. We detected the device arrival of Bluetooth device manager as well as our remembered and connected Bluetooth device. As you can see, successfully added my scanner. We also updated the device list. And so here, where it says edit device name, this is essentially where we're going to input our new name. And then once we have a valid string value here, we'll be able to click this button, and that should initiate the set property request and essentially change the friendly name of our device. So let's actually try that now. We'll change it to test. And let's click that button. Perfect. So we essentially just changed the name of our device from my scanner to test. So if we disconnect it, removed it, and then if we reconnect it, it should reflect the updated name property. And there we go. So yeah, that is essentially brief introduction to the Socket Mobile Capture SDK for Flutter. Showed you how to open a Capture instance to essentially initiate your connection to the Capture client. Once that's successful and you've tied an event listener to your root capture, you can start listening for various events such as device arrival, which you saw when we connected our D740 scanner, as well as device removal, which is essentially when you disconnect the device. I can show that now. There we go. And then, yeah, also decoded device is another event that essentially is detected when you try to scan some sort of data. And then you can get various properties from your device. In our case, we retrieved the friendly name from our scanner, and then we were also able to update our device's name property by using set property. All righty. I think that's it for me.